They were one of the first rock bands to play behind the Iron Curtain, and the experience inspired the creation of a song that became a pivotal soundtrack for an earth-shaking political and cultural movement. Let's jump into the time machine and take a boat ride down the Moskva River in 1989, whistling along the melody of The Wind of Change, next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. I'm telling you, if you love the music of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, you're going to really relate to this channel. Make sure that you subscribe below and click the bell so you always get our daily features, the stories from the legends. Also, check out more content at our page on Patreon. The link is below. You can become an insider, get more content, and you can help us keep the music alive. Very important. Now, it was German rock pioneer Rudolf Schenker who founded the Scorpions in Hanover, Germany, way back in 1965. Rudolf's tenacity as a guitarist and his entrepreneurial drive guided the band into a 14-year period between 1979 and 1993, when Scorpions were one of the most formidable hard rock bands in the world. The venomous sting of Scorpions' musical attacks shot through your bloodstream, especially when you heard bangers like Another Piece of Meat, Another Piece of Meat, The Zoo, No One Like You, there was Blackout, of course, Rock You Like a Hurricane. The group's fearless nature, led by Schenker, magnified to a whole new level of intensity when the formative lineup took shape in the 1970s. And there was Schenker on lead guitar, Klaus Meine, his glass-shattering lead vocals, Herman Rarebell on drums, and Francis Buchholz on bass and backing vocals. The Scorpions lived by the adage that rules were made to be broken. That bold attitude propelled the music that they created and the locations they chose for their live tours. In 1988, the Scorpions became one of the first bands to play in the Soviet Union. During an uneasy period with rumblings of insurrection at the height of the Cold War, most artists had no interest in playing behind the Iron Curtain, but for the Scorpions, it was their destiny to do it. The Scorps were allowed to play multiple gigs in Leningrad after first being denied the chance to play in Moscow by Soviet authorities. The Soviet government, they were afraid of potential rioting between Russian citizens and people representing many nationalities from Eastern Europe that lived in the capital city at that time. The band returned in 1989 as one of the performing acts at the Moscow Music Peace Festival, dubbed the Woodstock of the USSR. The festival was just stacked with a who's who lineup of the hottest rock acts on the scene. There was Ozzy Osbourne, Scorpions, Motley Crue, Skid Row, Cinderella, and Bon Jovi, who headlined. A reported crowd of more than 250,000 attended the giant rock fest held at Moscow's Lenin Stadium. Klaus Meine described the adrenaline rush he felt when he and the band hit the stage and looked over that massive crowd. He said, and I quote, "Everyone was there, the Red Army, journalists, and musicians from Germany, America, England, and Russia."
To go to Russia today and play there, it's like playing in front of a virtual audience.
Klaus was overwhelmed by the unbelievable sight of hundreds of thousands of Russians on their feet, cheering for a German band of all things. Mina vividly recalled that when Scorps kicked off their set with Blackout. All of the Red Army soldiers in attendance, along with all of the security personnel, turned to face the stage and threw their caps and jackets in the air. To Klaus and his bandmates, it just felt like the world was changing right before their very eyes. Mine interpreted the sea of concert goers as humanity traveling together on one humongous boat, with everyone speaking the same language. That life-changing moment is what inspired the historic Scorpions power ballad, Wind of Change.
Wind of change.
After their festival performance, Klaus was floating down the Moskva River with his bandmates, looking at the decay of old cultural and political barriers, when he just started whistling a melody that put the idea for the lyrics and the music for Wind of Change in his head. It inspired the first verse of Klaus's riveting narrative. Follow the Moskva down to Gorky Park, listening to the wind of change.
Gorky Park, listening to the wind.
An August summer night, soldiers passing by.
Summer night, soldiers passing by.
The Scorpions manager, Doc McGee, who was one of the two main organizers of the Moscow Peace Music Festival, he recalled the band coming back on a bus from the event, and Klaus was whistling that infectious melody. The next day, Klaus had the basic structure of the song. He had it all figured out. He just couldn't wait to go into the studio when they returned from their trip, to lay it down. McGee faced some controversy for his role as a principal architect for the Moscow Peace Music Festival. In addition to the Scorps, Doc, of course, managed virtually the entire lineup of the festival, including Bon Jovi. The other bands on the bill, they felt that Doc was giving Bon Jovi preferential treatment, including the headliner billing and the approval to use pyrotechnics. Pyro, of course, big part of Motley Crue's concert, but the crew was told that they couldn't have pyro in their set at that festival, and when they saw that Bon Jovi used pyro in their closing set, they confronted Doc, only to be told that the reason that they weren't allowed to use pyro is because there was a malfunction. Motley's iconic drummer Tommy Lee was so incensed by Doc's repeated favoritism towards Bon Jovi that he allegedly punched Doc in the face backstage. He took it upon himself to actually fire McGee on the spot. In fact, Lee and his bandmates were so pissed off at McGee, they refused to fly back to America on the same charter with McGee on board. About 3 months after the Moscow Music Peace Festival, the Berlin Wall was torn down. It was such a monumental milestone in world history that Klaus Meine and his fellow countrymen never thought it would happen. Klaus articulated his amazement of that glorious day in the second verse for Wind of Change. The world is closing in. And did you ever think that you would be so close like brothers?
Like brothers.
The future's in the air. I can feel it everywhere, blowing with the wind of change.
In the air, can feel it everywhere.
As we go into this breakdown, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, who helps this channel keep the music alive. At Zenni.com right now, they have their newest frames up, all kinds of styles and colors and great features that you can add. My favorite is Blue Blocks. When you put Blue Blocks on your glasses, you are protected against digital blue light. It's very cool. Check it out today. Speaking of when everything changed, when the wall came down, I remember as a little kid, like in the second grade, we watched Night Crossing. It was a Disney movie about some people that got into a hot air balloon. They tried to cross over. They planned the whole time, made this hot air balloon, tested it out, almost got caught one time, did it a second time, and they finally got across. And I had so much anxiety watching this. I couldn't believe that this was actually going on in the world that I was living in as this little child. So I remember exactly where I was in class when they announced that the wall came down, and it had such an effect on me. It was just incredible. Because of the anxiety of seeing that and believing now that these people were free.
It would only take 28 minutes and a miracle. Night Crossing, rated PG.
In 1990, the Scorpions went to work in Los Angeles with legendary producer Keith Olsen to record the Crazy World album that would include the finished version of Klaus Meine's Wind of Change. Because the song was born from whistling, Klaus thought that that was a logical way for the song's arrangement to unfold. However, the band's label, Mercury Records, they hated the idea of the song starting with whistling, especially because Scorpions were one of the premier metal acts in the world. Whistling didn't really go along with that outlook. The label pushed for the band to go the traditional route with a prominent guitar intro. The band tried it, tried it the label's way. Just didn't sound very good. So they decided to put Klaus's whistling above a clean guitar riff, and that ended up being the perfect opening for Wind of Change. Now, the whistling in Wind of Change actually proved to be the iconic highlight of the track, no question. Klaus believed that the famous whistling throughout the recording of Wind of Change is an auditory symbol of how the children of tomorrow will be able to share their dreams in a globalized world. And he sang about it in the chorus. Fall of the Berlin Wall was part of perestroika period in Soviet history. Perestroika, literally translated, it means reconstruction. It was a label that referred to the reconstruction of the economic and political system of the Soviet Union, with a goal to put an end to a Brezhnev-era stagnation, a term that was coined by the last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev. In theory, perestroika allowed more independence within ministries and within the market economy. That movement, however, created a shortage in goods and services and fueled tension within the Soviet Union that many believe led to the rise of nationalism and nationalist parties within the Soviet republics. And perestroika and the fall of the Berlin Wall, it was the political and cultural backdrop for Wind of Change. The track was not merely another power rock ballad. It was the soundtrack to a revolution. I mean, anybody who was alive at this time, in 1989, going into 1990, with everything happening in the world, including the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, you can attest that it was truly an extraordinary time in history. And as always, the backdrop of all of that history was music. There were several songs that captured that earth-shattering moment. We'll have to talk about a few of those another time, but briefly, it's like Mike Edwards sang in another great song that was inspired by these events, Jesus Jones' hit Right Here, Right Now, one of my favorite songs ever.
Right here, right now, there is no other place.
When he said Bob Dylan didn't have this to sing about. It feels good to be alive.
Feels good to be alive.
And then later when he sang Watching the World Wake Up from History.
Watching the world wake up from history.
As a Gen Xer, it was an amazing moment to experience what felt like our generation's beacon of change. I'd heard my grandparents, the greatest generation, they told me about World War II. My parents, both baby boomers, had told me about the civil rights movement and when the conflict at Vietnam had ended. Well, right before our very eyes, we were seeing history happening in real time with a soundtrack that tattooed its resonance and its impact upon our souls. With our own personal experiences that we would share with our own children. I know I have. Of all those great songs that met that moment in history, Wind of Change was the biggest in my mind. The impact of Wind of Change went far beyond a catchy sing-along chorus or the casual whistling of a melody. From a social perspective, Wind of Change is certainly one of the most significant songs recorded during the rock and roll era. Throughout Europe, the song was a hymn for hope. Still regarded as the anthem for the German reunification.
Change flows straight into that phase of time.
Wind of Change became one of the biggest selling singles of all time, with estimated sales of the single exceeding 16 million copies around the world. That's according to 2019 figures. It continues to grow. It was released as the third single from the Scorpions' 11th studio album, Crazy World, in 1991. The song holds the record for being the greatest selling single by a German act. The single blew to #1 in virtually every country in Europe and just missed the top in UK and Denmark. It peaked at #2. In America, Wind of Change rose to #4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was a #2 track on the mainstream rock chart. Again, the perfect song for the moment and what had transpired. Now, the video for Wind of Change was directed by the widely acclaimed director Wayne Isham and integrated some striking footage of the construction and the deconstruction of the Berlin Wall. In 1991, Gorbachev invited the members of the Scorpions for a private meeting with he and his wife at the Kremlin in Moscow. The conversation between the 5 Scorps and Gorbachev was mostly about music, and the band was shocked about how much the couple knew about their music and about them as people. There was a brief but poignant moment during the visit where Klaus shared a childhood memory of former Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev pounding his shoe on the table at the United Nations in 1960, and how disturbing that was for him as a 12-year-old boy. The band took the opportunity to bestow praise and support for the leader's action towards social democracy and knocking down the infamous Berlin Wall. As reported by Soviet news agencies, the band gave Gorbachev 2 checks during their meeting that totaled $70,000. Half of the amount was from the band, and the other half was from Mercury Records. The money was to be donated to be applied to medical equipment at children's hospitals in several Soviet cities. I gotta tell you, great music has the potential to change the world. Actually, the meeting with Gorbachev and the international influence of Wind of Change sparked a crazy conspiracy theory, believe it or not. There were and still are people that are convinced that Wind of Change was not written by Klaus Meine, but actually written by the CIA designed to precipitate the fall of communism. The track even became a focal point of the Wind of Change podcast. That's an 8-part series that came out decades after the song's release as a single.
Walking down the street, distant memories.
The Wind of Change podcast has been described as Spinal Tap meets All the President's Men. I'm not going to comment on the conspiracy theory, except to say that some people have a little bit too much time on their hands. But hey, you know, it's the 2020s. Wind of Change is truly a pop culture touchstone, especially in the Scorpions' native Germany, a country that has overcome a lot over its turbulent history. As world-renowned German musicians, the Scorpions felt that they had a greater responsibility to use their stature and their music to evoke social and cultural change. Going back to the first time that they brazenly performed concerts in Russia. According to Scorps founder Rudolf Schenker, the band wanted to show the Russian people that there is a new generation of Germans that are not rumbling through villages with tanks and guns to make war. The new generation is coming with guitars and rock and roll and bringing love. For the other bands that played at the legendary Moscow Music Peace Festival, the attitude was likely, dude, we just rocked the Soviet Union. Whereas the members of the Scorpions, hailing from a divided Germany, relished the experience as being part of a momentous change in the world order in the early 1990s. The Scorpions won the nationally acclaimed Peace Prize in Poland. Klaus Meine called it the band's ultimate achievement. In 2005, viewers of the German TV channel ZDF, they voted Wind of Change as the song of the century. How the Scorpions were able to use their musical artistry to help evoke social change and unify nations. It's an incredible affirmation to the brilliant Henry Wadsworth Longfellow quote that says, "Music is the universal language of mankind." Indeed, great music has the ability to define the magic of any moment. Leave us a comment about this life-changing song and about the Scorpions. What are your thoughts? What are your memories of that pivotal time in music where history was being made as the music emphasized the moment? Let us know below. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below so you never miss a daily video. stories from the legends. Check us out on Patreon as well, where we'll be talking more about moments in music like this, where you can get much more content as well. Help us keep the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.